AMILES is with us in the studio. Welcome to the studio with us.
Thank you.
PTP affiliated. Anybody who gang sends my way, I'm already gonna be interested in. I have a lot of respect for that guy. We've got just released your primarily self-produced new album, Aight So Boom, which is about as New York as it gets. The titles just dropped last week. You can pick it up on Bandcamp or wherever music is streamed or sold right now. Definitely go check it out. It's less than a half hour, but trust me, you are going to be putting this one on rewind for sure. With a title like that.
Yes.
Aight So Boom. Are you a New York native?
No, I was born in LA.
You were born in LA.
Yeah,
So when did you get out here?
I moved here 06. I moved here when I was 15.
Okay.
33 now.
Got it. And what was it that got you out here? Was it family stuff? Was it school stuff? Was it
just
life?
Nomadic mother. A nomadic mother.
Yeah.
We moved out here to actually learn capoeira with one of like the grandmasters who lives out here. Yeah. So I started it and then we just stayed out here.
Is that something you still do?
Yes, on and off.
Okay.
Yeah, but not as dedicated as I should. But
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's an interesting sort of I've heard a lot of people move to New York for a lot of reasons.
Right.
Capoeira mastery is definitely not one of the more common responses you get on that.
Yeah.
And where did music sort of fit in with all this? Was this something you were interested in your teens? Was this a little later?
Yeah, for sure. It was like between finding myself and that, like, it was between DJing, which I did start, but then right before I moved, I had to sell all my equipment, even my records that I had. I was getting into tagging. This was all in LA, but right before, so when I moved to New York, it was like a whole new, like, all right, I got to start from scratch. I don't have any equipment, don't have any whatever. So I feel like naturally it was just, and in capoeira, there's live instrumentation,
sure.
You know. So I feel like music has always been a thing around me, but what started was New York punk scene for me, honestly. Going to shows and then starting a band and then eventually teaching myself production and wanting to keep that energy going for myself and like just see where I can go with it.
So I'm definitely curious about this sort of creative journey because you've existed under a couple different names over the years. You've been Hardcore Bay, you've been HBIC, you were even Adrian from Marudos, like you were, exactly. You've had a few things. So like help me understand that, like kind of who the hell you are in the sense of this. Like, how do you get, what is this journey in terms of your names?
Right.
Because, obviously from the punk scene to this, and there is definitely some crossover on this record. We're talking about the Dog Breath song for sure. Mm-hmm. But I think there's something about that, for me as somebody who kind of grew up here and got caught up in various scenes from like teenage years and like the industrial goth scenes in New York, and then kind of get into hardcore and punk, and also hip hop being kind of a constant throughout my life. I grew up here, so it's sort of just back, it's back always part of the kind of tapestry of being a New Yorker. Yes. Even people who don't say that they're hip hop fans who live in New York, they know hip hop.
Exactly.
It's part of the experience. Exactly. So tell me a bit about kind of how this journey goes for you as you kind of go into the punk scene and how that sort of evolves into some of these other aliases and projects.
Yeah, like my mom was always into goth, like punk. She like her shit was like Suicidal Tendencies and Susie and the Banshees, but it didn't stick for me. It was like wasn't like a thing of choice until I started to like kind of find it on my own. But it wasn't until I lived in Jersey for a couple years too. Okay. And my homies from Jersey they just take me around. My homie Edie. Would take me around to like different punk shows and was like, oh shit, like this is my shit. And you know, back when Afro punk was still punk.
Yes,
right. You know, so it was like, oh shit, like this is my kind of energy. Obviously, like you said, just like hip hop through and through is always gonna be like a staple. It's gonna be a rice and beans cereal in the morning, you know, and then you have whatever you want later at night. But yeah, so just going to punk shows across, you know, different scenes and genres, even metal. Like I was into metal, new metal, death metal for a second too. So it was just like this expansive journey for me, just trying to explore, like taking in, but also like, okay, so I'm getting all this inspiration. So what is my sound outwardly gonna end up looking like, you know? And trying to start a band for years, trying, and then, you know, Maduros ended up happening, which was like, oh shit, this is happening. And that was fun. That was a really special time for me.
How long did that band go for?
Like a year, like a solid, like a good year.
Which is just kind of classic kind of hardcore punk.
Right.
It's like the band is around for a year and then it's like we're still listening to demo tape 5 years later. Just still like rocking it. And I know you've got some stuff on Bandcamp. People can listen to some of the songs from there. They definitely should, because I think honestly, like there's something to be said like about that. Now during that time period, like what was that like? Like was that the kind of like ABC No Rio sort of scene, or is that something different? Like where was sort of like did you guys have a home base? Was there like a space or a scene where you felt most comfortable with?
Yeah, like I guess personally, me, I was always like kind of in and out of on my own, trying to find like a space for me. I went to a lot of shows at the Acheron when it was 538 here and there, but I wasn't like for me. Like it was there, like I'm gonna be wherever music is. But I was like, okay, found myself at Silent Burn a lot. And I feel like identity politically wise, I was just more active and more like present as opposed to like the straight up like just throwing beer cans at each other and, leather jacket stud, just, doing pump just to look it. But like, what are your politics? What are your, like, are you welcoming, people of all demographics in? Or are you just, accepting people that look like you into social circles and whatnot? So I was like, okay, where do I find myself in all of this? But slowly connecting with like-minded folks. The Glove was a big one for us because I knew the folks from the Glove personally. I lived with them for a summer in a closet, in one of their loft closets. And it's kind of like everything was like little seeds that germinated for me, and they eventually all connected together.
And so kind of that project ends, and you're sort of in this stage. You're clearly still interested in making music and doing stuff. When do you sort of transition into the HBIC stuff?
That was like right after Maduro. So it was like an in-between like phase. Like obviously we were having to find new guitarists, like, folks in lives, folks moving, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, band shit, life. I guess for me in my own, I really love this thing. I found this outlet, like I need to keep this going. So I was like, fuck, I gotta do something. So I was like, okay, maybe I have enough gall now to start a solo project. I don't know what it's gonna sound like, but with that energy and inspiration of punk and like my love for all music, I was like, I don't know, maybe I can find a middle ground or like create a sound that is all encompassing between my love for hip hop, for oldies, for hardcore punk. I'm like, I don't know what it's gonna sound like, but let's try. Let me teach myself some production, learn every time I'm in the studio or at a homie's crib, just learning what I can.
That's one of the things I really like about this album as AMILES under Aight So Boom, because it is sort of this diverse record. Of course, we're talking about 8 songs here. We're talking about a fairly short runtime, but within that, there's this variety of different styles and sounds, and it doesn't seem disjointed. It actually feels. Obviously, there's.
Thank you.
Well, that's the concern.
That's very right.
Just trust me, I listen to plenty of things where there's and I love some of these people dearly, so I'm not going to mention any names. But some people, it's like if somebody threw a hardcore song onto their hip hop album, sometimes it just sounds like a really jarring moment that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about the way it flows and the way it exists, and kind of understanding a bit more. Which is why I keep asking you sort of context questions about your background, because I want to get an understanding that people to understand. Like it isn't just like, I'm just trying this, see how it feels. Like no, this is something you have a connection to in terms of your history, and it's important to kind of know that because it feels that way when you listen to it.
Exactly.
And again, I'm just purely coming from the listener's perspective on this.
Hey,
I'm glad to be right.
Thank you. Word, yeah.
In this situation, but you've got like a hardcore song, and I keep bringing this up. The World's a Nightmare, which sounds suspiciously like Dog Corpay off of Dog Breath. So I know obviously you guys are sharing it.
Very much is.
It's really get you. I do my research, but it is legitimately the kind of thing that you would have seen or heard at Akron at any one of those venues for sure. Mm-hmm. And sort of you've got this mix in there, and I think that's really important for people to understand that it's not just strictly one style on this record. So you can find a number of things to enjoy, and it speaks a lot to how people engage with material. And people aren't just purists are going to appreciate this on different levels. what was your approach to this project in terms of that? Obviously, I feel like it has accomplished something there. But did you set out to make a record that was intentionally going to be diverse in sound and sort of a reflection of you across these different styles or modes?
Essentially, yeah. And for all the like what you just said, it was just like I like wanting to tie it all together and all my musical journeys and names of like, okay, this being my final name, I cannot change my name anymore. If I do, just please take me out back and shoot me. But yeah, it was just, I guess this musical journey of like, how can I tie even like from beginning to end, like in the order of things of my journey sampling, my journey into live instrumentation and reincorporating that into like an album with trap music on it or like sample based shit. So I'm just like, how? And a lot of these songs took like 3 years in the making of like, even Think I Cried Enough. Like I was sitting on that, I think about 4 years. Like I wrote that in like 2020, 2021, but it did not sound like it did now. Like it changed, even like a single song, for example, like had changed over years and it became better and better and better. And I'm happy I sat on it. But even then, like I was like unhappy with myself for sitting on something, but like thinking about it now, sometimes you have to let things sit and maybe make edits, or for whatever reason, things will tie together at some point later, and maybe it's gonna sound heavier, maybe it's gonna tie into this. And then I started to see, once I had all these collections of songs, I saw how they could be tied together if I arranged them in a way that made sense sonically. If I like, you know, how would it look or be listened to, played from front to back? Yeah. And that's what I try to keep in mind.
I mean, it does play very well across, especially again the way it ends is a different vibe than what precedes it.
Yeah.
It sort of has a sort of post-club feel to it, which, you know, again, kind of sets a stage for what things might come next, what might come in the future. Like, it's a good sort of teasing moment. And it's something that I talk to a number of artists about. Is even when I talk to like big major label artists, not in this room, obviously, but when I talk to some of these folks and they talk about how they seed their albums with ideas that they're still fleshing out because they're spending time working on things.
Exactly.
This is a process. And this is, if anything, a snapshot of where you are in that process. Yeah. Is that fair to say?
Exactly. Very, very fair to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get into one of the songs on this record, on Aight So Boom. We've had a couple of really good choices, but we went with, for our first pick today, Serotonin. What can you tell me about Serotonin?
Man, Serotonin didn't even, like, the original beat sounded completely different. But then I don't know, something called for me to change the beat entirely, because at first I was like, well, heavy, sounded a little like ethereal, gothy, some like more 808 soundy, but I wanted to sample this particular song. And something called to me, because it was just a point in my life in which I was like, this song is like getting so much emotional like response out of myself. So I'm like, fuck. So I found myself just rapping to that song, and I was like, oh shit, you know what? And it's kind of part of my creative process. Like I start to, if I have any lyrics in mind, I'll just start rapping over the original song. So this song, I was just like, oh fuck, like I think something's here. So let me scrap this whole thing, make a whole new beat, work on it, and then it stuck. The way I found out about this record is how I found out about a lot of really great music in this city. Is through Gang at PTP, Tape Pedigree. How did you two connect? We connected last I remember. I just feel like mutual spaces and sounds. Also, like the more I get to know Gang, I'm like, yo, your musical ear. Even like when I catch his DJ sets, I'm so just blown away. I'm like, yo, you're such a like audio archive of every genre. But I think we connected through a friend, Kala BTZ, who I've also worked with as a friend, like engineer. I think he booked me, and also Gang performed maybe that same show under King Ultra. Yeah. And I think that's how, like, that was one of the first times. And then keeping in contact, and also through a mutual friend of ours, Dream Crusher. Yeah, so I feel like mutual sound spaces, and then just connecting on like minds, and doing calisthenics outside.
Yeah, staying fit.
But yeah. And then I was able to, through him, just meet a lot of PTP folks and a lot of like-minded audio people. It was also like just like-minded hearts, just people. So I was like, okay, wow, this is.
You talked earlier, something you were talking about, like finding a space for yourself, finding a space where you fit in. And like the one thing I can say as somebody who's adjacent to PTP is that it is very much a community. It very much feels that way. And it's the people in there are folks who you respect them as artists, but also it seems like there are some genuine connections on multiple levels.
Facts, yeah, for
which
sure.
I think is helpful. And I think for like to put out a record like this, like to put out a record and kind of to work with PTP on getting this record out into the world, you need a supportive environment, because among the topics and things that are discussed in this record, obviously there's quite a bit about what's happening in Gaza, and a lot of labels or what have you these days are quite squeamish on speaking too strongly on these issues. I happen to be in a position where I've talked to a number of artists. I have an interview that we're doing the newsletter with Infinity Knives and Brian Annals, who their record is very forward about their views on this, and very much about their opposition to genocide and calling it a genocide. And I am going to ask you a question I asked them as well, because there are seemingly, given what's happening in this country right now, that people are being detained and even deported simply for speaking out against this. Do you have concerns? Are you worried at all about being so vocal in your work and in your music? It's just in really a way that I can describe as some level of activism. Do you feel worried about speaking your views in this way on your record?
No, yes, no. As any average person who could, I guess, comfortably, repost a story, repost a GoFundMe, repost an action that's happening, whether it gets dubbed by Instagram or not, in which the algorithm has learned to really cut ties from each other in the way that we're easily able to connect with each other, to share information, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, and respect to my own shit, like I'm still a very underground, very small time, quote unquote, artist. So I'm like, hey, this shit, exactly. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I could get away with saying what the fuck I want and should, and that's the goal and point for me, to use music, use expression to reflect the times. And I think that is our duty as humans, first and foremost, as artists as well. Like, what are you using your medium for? Obviously to express self, but like what is self going through, what is self feeling? And I feel like that's something, even with my doodles, I was very inspired, because like I had to. I was fucked up. I was like, yo, this is not okay. So how do I write about it? How do I yell about it? Because it's not legal to just go up to a cop and punch him in the fucking face. But we're all feeling it. We all want to. So, and that's the beauty of punk. That's of the I don't give a fuck attitude. Like, you're going to get this expression, this raw expression, how I give it to you. And that should be something extended to all artists of any genre, and especially in hip hop, because hip hop is very punk. So, and should be. That's a whole other conversation, but you know what I mean?
It's related, because I did want to sort of bring up this sort of punk ethos and all this, because the reality is, like, if you grew up listening to, or you were exposed to, I think about records like Agnostic Front's Victim in Pain, for example, and it's like some of the stuff that like Roger Murray wrote for that group. I'm not saying I endorse every single thing that band has done and every single fan base that comes to that shows to be that scary. Right. To be real, some people get on stage who are not in the band. I go, oh, okay. But Roger is a Cuban American, and so as another Cuban American, same with him and like Freddie Madball. Like, I relate to those guys in that respect. But there's certain things I don't agree with them on. That's the caveat part.
Right.
But like, to hear some of the stuff that he was doing on those early records, you sort of hear these very personal appeals. And then if they go by, like, say, fitting with the same sort of era, like your Minor Threat records, those days, like, I'm listening to the straight edge stuff. I was never straight edge, but I was listening to those records and kind of hearing, things like, you don't want to be the small man with a big mouth. You don't want to be, I mean, maybe I was a teenager hearing those records for the first time, being like, I do still want to like have sex in life. I do. I'm not really to at this stage of my life. I'm not where Ian Mackay is, but I'm also like maybe I'm kind of where like the circle jerks are. Maybe I am like I like Wild in the Streets is that's the idea that gets you excited. And you get this political thing, and then you get like and I'm going to these very old hardcore touch points like Dead Kennedys and General Biafra, teaching you about all these different things and giving voice to hating your landlord. Giving voice to shit like that.
Just straight up lynching your landlord.
The point is like, exactly. So the point I'm kind of trying to, I'm making, and I'm looking to you to think about this further. I'd rather talk more about this because the truth is that having that background probably endears you, or I'm trying to think the best word for it, but it puts you in a position where you probably are more inclined to be freer in your lyricism than some others who might have come at this from a different perspective.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So with that in mind, this is topically something that's very meaningful right now, but there's also stuff on this record that's very obviously personal.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, we can mix the personal and political. That is a conversation we could spend, half hour talking about it. But like, when I think about something like Think I Cried Enough, tell me a bit about sort of the motivations behind that one, sort of where it is. Because I feel like all the songs on the album, and I enjoyed the full record, that feels to me one of the most kind of fully formed in terms of its ideas and its execution, both musically and lyrically. So I'd love to hear a bit more about kind of the lyrical side of that and how that song sort of evolved, especially since you said earlier that this was not a song that started out the way it ended up.
Right, yeah. And I think for me emotionally, it's just like through life, right? Like over a span of 4 years, you you should hopefully grow emotionally, spiritually, or in every sense, or sometimes you might deteriorate and come right back. You might come full circle, like circle of life in meme form type shit. But overall, like having dealt with self-esteem, like shit, classic, like and also personally, just to be straight up, like having had a history of self-harm, and as the self-harm itself has changed how it may look, it's like, if you're not physically hurting yourself, you can still hurt yourself emotionally or put yourself in harmful situations or around harmful people. And then you internalize all that shit, and it's like you get to a certain point where it's like it's hard to differentiate all of that, and that becomes your own inner voice. So I'm like, for me to write about, like, I think I've cried enough, so I'm smelling all gas, it's all laughs. Like, I'm really like, okay, it's all laughs from here on out. Like, I really cannot play with my own time and my own space. Like, I can't play, like, life is short, unfortunately, and the world is the world. So it's like, okay, what do you do with your time here on this earth? If it is anything, at least learn to love yourself, learn to like boost yourself. However, and it's like fake it till you make it, but like not even, to the point it's like don't even fake it, like really whatever it looks like. So that for me was like a conversation with me and myself. I mean, also, but with my own shit talking. So it's like, in a classic like double meaning of like, I'm talking my shit, but I'm also like bigging myself up. Like this is me writing to myself, and that kind of like, oh wow, like when I first wrote this to now, it kind of has so much more meaning to me now than it did when I first wrote it. So I was like, oh shit, like this seems like it was like a letter from the past to future, and then future to past self. Like, hey, like we did that. We did that leap.
Yeah, and the music video seems like a real expression of that as well. Like there's a certain kind of joy that is occurring in that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely recommend people check that out too. So, are you planning on putting these songs, doing some live shows, doing anything to put this out in the world? What's coming up for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Took a big break. I feel like or like a step back from doing live shows, but with this record, I wanted to hold off, and then get ready to start doing live shows. Tours, fingers crossed, inshallah, all that, and getting the ball rolling. I do have a show, me, gang, Senti G's, Dream Crusher, and some other friends.
Cool.
Coming up May 15th at Transpicos. That's a Thursday. Definitely going to be promoting that, but yeah, first of May.